Okay, and now it's time for our weekend picks. Tomorrow is set to be a very busy day of action, busy night in some parts of the world, busy day here in the United States, busy overall. We know that tomorrow, two of Matchroom's recent signees, Ramla Ali is going to be taking on Connolly. Ellie Scottney is going to be taking on Melis Gengloff of Le France. Comes to that Ramla Ali versus Connolly fight. Beck hasn't actually had the chance to rebound since being battered by Ellie Scottney, who's fighting on the same card. Beck hasn't had a rebound fight. She's being matched pretty tough here, fighting these blue-chip prospects in succession. I think it's important to note that in spite of the beating that Ellie Scottney put on Connolly, Beck did finish the fight on her feet. She did go the distance. It's just that the distance in that fight was only 6 rounds.
I think if it went a few rounds longer, she would have got stopped.
Tomorrow's fight, or today's fight, depending on what part of the world you're in by the time this video is uploaded, this fight is also a 6-rounder like the Scottney fight was. And Scottney, Ellie landed some really hard shots. I mean,
fucked her up.
She was really pouring it on thick on Beck. And Beck, she's tough. She took the shots, she weathered the shots, and she went the distance. It's just that, well, the distance was only 6 rounds, the way it's 6 rounds here. So I think the conservative prediction for this fight, with Ramla Ali being only 1 fight into her professional career, this is going to be the 2nd fight of her professional career. She's going to attempt to go 2-0. With those things in mind, I think the conservative prediction is Ramla Ali on points. Now, this upcoming Ellie Scottney versus Melis Gengloff fight, this strikes me as more of a contest than the Ramla Ali versus Connolly fight. Melis Gengloff has her version.
She's got some tools.
I want to say that
she's all right.
She's not as bouncy as Ellie Scottney is. She's not as fleet of foot, not as nimble on her feet, not as agile, not as athletic.
She doesn't have Ellie's hand speed.
Or Ellie's sharpness. But that's not saying that Melis doesn't bring something to the table. She does. I mean, she does have more professional contests than Ellie. She's 5 fights into her professional career. She's got a professional record of 4 wins, 1 loss, never been stopped.
1 recorded knockout.
Don't let the fact that she only has 1 recorded knockout fool you. To the eye, Melis does seem to pack a punch. She does seem to be a rather strong puncher. This affirmation is further asserted by the fact that Melis isn't very fleet of foot. She's not fighting on the balls of her feet. She's sitting on those punches while she comes forward. The trademark, the calling card for Melis, seems to be come forward, aggression, and good quality of punches. Not the best.
It's decent.
She strikes me as a more put-together fighter than, say, Dora Denora, who locked horns with Shannon Courtenay not that long ago. I have to say that Melis does look to be a more put-together fighter than that fighter was. I mean, there are some tools there. There are some virtues.
I think at minimum, she hits hard.
I think at minimum, the virtue of Melis Gengloff is that she's a strong, come-forward puncher that lives for the exchange. A mid-range to inside puncher that wants to mix it up. And because this is what she wants, I'd wager that Ellie Scottney is going to deprive her of those opportunities.
By sticking and moving.
Not necessarily from the outside, not long distance per se, but in the pocket by staying off the line, slipping shots, and hooking off. Evade and counter. I want to say that Ellie's performance against Connolly had a lot of wow factor. So I am expecting that wow factor to be present here in this fight with Melis Gengloff. Melis does look solid, I want to say that. She strikes me as a tough girl that can take a hard shot, so I'm not banking on a stoppage, though if one happens, that really would knock my socks off.
The conservative prediction is a decision.
The conservative way to go is Ellie Scottney on points. When it comes to the main event of that same card, the cruiserweight contest, cruiserweight title fight between Lorenzo Coley, Krzysztof Glowacki. I've talked about this fight many times in many videos. And I can only tell you now what I told you before. I've got Lawrence winning this fight, and I've got Lawrence winning this fight by way of knockout. The last time we saw Lawrence, we saw more of a jab, and that's been a big hang-up for me when it comes to Lawrence O'Coley. That given the physical dimensions that this guy has, if he can develop a solid jab and employ it, use it as a key.
Step into it.
To close the gap on some of these smaller fighters, set up that good old 1-2 from the outside coming in, to keep the other guy's guns holstered as Lawrence O'Coley draws closer. If he can do this, he can be an even better fighter than he's already been, because if you know anything about Lawrence O'Coley, you'll know that this guy...
It's a big guy.
He's turning every fight into a goddamn clinch fest, and it's not needed because this guy's wingspan is dimensions for cruiserweight. He's the guy who could easily fill out to heavyweight. Big guy, big reach. Kind of guy that if he develops a solid jab, there's not a lot you can do to get close to him. The last time we saw Lawrence, we saw just that. A solid jab, solid 1-2, setting up that right hand. I happen to think that Lawrence Okolie is a very strong puncher. Moreover, I happen to think that Krzysztof Glowacki doesn't take the best punch. The last time we saw Lawrence Okolie, it was against Nikodem Jazuski. And I really liked what I saw from Lawrence Okolie. He's got Shane McGuigan in his corner now. Shane McGuigan is training Lawrence Okolie, and that might explain the change in Lawrence that we're seeing. I happen to have a high opinion of Shane McGuigan. I happen to think he's one of the best trainers in the United Kingdom. That's what I happen to think. And I happen to think that all these aforementioned factors combined create an environment where Lawrence Okolie is not only going to win, but win by way of knockout and go on to become the WBO's cruiserweight champion.
That's what I think's going to happen on the Matchroom card.
In keeping with tomorrow's action, Greece's own Kalia Karuni is going to be fighting south of the border against Mexico's own Diana Gonzalez. Diana lost one to Maureen Shea, lost one to Kylie Fulmer, and lost one to Candy Wyatt. She could very well lose one tomorrow to Kalia Karuni, who has been training here stateside. The importance of this fight, in spite of how low it might be flying on the radar, is that this is a WBC eliminator. There's going to be a WBC trinket title on the line in this fight, a WBC international title, and this fight is going to be fought in the super featherweight division. Essentially what this is a step closer to challenging the super featherweight division's WBC champion. That champion is Terry Harper. Terry Harper, who Kalia Karuni had a Twitter war with not that long ago. This fight is a step in that direction. So if Kalia Karuni wins tomorrow, that's one step closer towards Terry.
Now, this fight isn't going to be televised, to my knowledge.
But I will be keeping an eye out for the winner, whoever the winner might be, though I am leaning towards Kalia Karuni to win this thing. Let's see what happens. Comes to the Goldenboy Promotions card set to go down tomorrow night here stateside. The co-main event between the reigning WBA minimum weight champion Annabelle Ortiz and Senicia Estrada. I've already broken down this fight. I mean, I made up my mind about this fight several weeks ago when it first became a talking point. I think at this weight, Senicia Estrada will be an even more devastating puncher than she is at these higher weights. I mean, Senicia Estrada can fight anywhere from 105 to 108.
To 112 pounds.
Makes Senicia Estrada even more dangerous is that she looks to have made the weight quite healthy, quite easily. So you couple Senicia Estrada's ferocity, her punching power, her speed, her movement, her athleticism, that creates an environment where Annabelle Ortiz, she might just get stopped. She just might. And that's really saying something, because Annabelle Ortiz has been the WBA minimum weight champion for at least 8 years now.
She's about 6 years older than Senicia.
34 years old, she's not getting any younger, she's not getting any faster. Annabelle was last in action in March of last year, early March of last year. That being said, it has been a full 12 months since 34-year-old Annabelle Ortiz had a fight, whereas Senicia Estrada was in action more recently last year, in July, against the then unbeaten Miranda Atkins, who, in spite of her unbeaten record, was a fish out of water with Senicia Estrada. We all know how much controversy that vicious knockout only seconds into the first round caused, whereas this time, Senicia Estrada is facing someone more capable, a lot more experienced as a professional than Senicia Estrada herself.
This is a worthy opponent.
But if I'm going with Senicia Estrada to win, and to win by way of knockout, it's because
Of a few things.
I think that Senicia is going to rise to the occasion. This is something that Senicia Estrada has wanted for some time, to fight for a world title, to become a full-fledged world champion. And given the age and inactivity of Annabelle Ortiz, that she has been out of action a year, to face someone as sharp and as physical, as aggressive as Senicia Estrada, well, that's the recipe for disaster comes to Annabelle. So I am going with Senicia Estrada to win, and win by way of knockout. Finally, when it comes to the main event of that same card, the Virgil Ortiz versus Maurice Hooker fight, welterweight contest. I've said this many times already. I think Virgil's going to stop this guy. You have to understand that Virgil's entire
Run at 147.
run in the welterweight division, he's been stopping seasoned veterans, guys who have been there and done that with far more experienced fighters than Virgil Ortiz himself. And Virgil has looked the part in every single contest, every single fight. I think the same will apply here with Maurice Hooker, who is a very entertaining fighter to watch. I mean, he really is. But I've said it before, and I'll say it here again. The same thing that makes Maurice Hooker such an entertaining fighter to watch is the same thing I think is going to work against him against Virgil Ortiz. Maurice has got a dog in him. He likes to tear up. He likes to bang. He likes the exchanges. And I don't think that's going to change with Virgil Ortiz tomorrow night. Or today, depending on when I upload this video. Better still, I think this is a better weight for Maurice Hooker. I think he'll feel a bit more invigorated, a bit more energized than he did before trying to make 140 pounds. You have to understand, Maurice Hooker has very generous physical dimensions.
For 140.
How he made 140 pounds for as long as he did is anybody's guess, because he's got a statuesque frame for a junior welterweight, and even now as a welterweight, he's still got very generous physical dimensions. But then again, so does Virgil Ortiz, with the difference being he's a younger fighter.
And he's a bit more solid than Maurice.
Virgil Ortiz is a fighter who I could very much see in the near future moving up to the junior middleweight division, and given his physical dimensions, he'd fit right in. I think he's a stronger puncher than Maurice Hooker. That's not saying that Maurice can't punch, that's just saying Virgil punches harder.
Maurice has been spending a lot of time with Bo Mack.
Brian McIntyre, Terrence Crawford's training. I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make. I'd wager that maybe in spots, maybe Maurice will look a little bit more solid, a little bit more healthy, a little bit more effective. But overall, I am going with Virgil Ortiz to win, and win by way of knockout. Continue that knockout streak of his.
Come one step closer to fighting Terrence Crawford.
I mean, he says he wants to fight. A lot of people have been talking about it. This is a step in that direction by way of the WBO, so maybe it could happen. I just struggle to shudder to think that the people over there at Goldenboy are going to take one of their blue chip prospects, one of their kids that really has a high ceiling, and throw him to the wolves with Terrence Crawford because he beat Maurice Hooker?
Do you guys really think they make that fight if he wins?
They put Ryan Garcia in a WBC final eliminator against Luke Campbell only so that Ryan Garcia can pass on the opportunity to fight Devin Haney. I mean, they placed no urgency on that fight. So when I think about this fight between Maurice and Virgil, and Virgil potentially winning, do they really let him move on from this to fight Terrence Crawford? I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but if you want my opinion, you're here, so I'll assume that you do. I do have Virgil Ortiz winning tomorrow, and winning by way of knockout. We then come to tomorrow's light heavyweight contest between unified light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev and dead man walking from Germany, Adam Deines. This fight is very much a formality. It's a necessary evil because Artur hasn't fought in a very long time.
He hasn't.
Several failed ring attempts. I mean, initially, the fight was supposed to go down in China. It wasn't even supposed to be Adam. It was supposed to be China's own Mengfeng Long. Some Chinese investors won the purse bid for the fight, but then they defaulted the fight to Top Rank because they didn't actually have the money. The fight ended up getting moved to Quebec. And when it got moved to Quebec, it was set to go down in late March, but we all know late March of last year, COVID-19 hit. Artur attempts to make his ring return a couple of weeks later, over a month, some time passes, and he breaks a rib in sparring. He's got to wait. After that, he heals up, the rib's fine, but he catches COVID-19, so once again, his ring return gets postponed. So, I mean, this ring return has been a long time coming. I mean, it really has. Artur, his entire professional boxing career, has been a victim of circumstance, and his activity really has suffered for it. From the days of the legal battle to get away from Yvonne Michel and Jim, because Artur wasn't happy with the schedule that he had. He wanted to fight more often. To his brief stint on DAZN and Matchroom, to subsequently moving on to Top Rank, his career has been riddled with inactivity for one reason or another. He is a victim of circumstance, purely circumstance.
And Adam has to suffer for it.
Because I have no doubts that once Artur Beterbiev sets foot in that squared circle, he's gonna beat the fucking shit out of Adam Deines as if it's his fault he's been out like this. There are very few punchers as destructive in their respective weights as Artur is in his. He is arguably the most devastating puncher in the light heavyweight division, and one of the biggest punchers in the entire sport of boxing. Every fight that this man has won, he's won by way of knockout, and he is an unbeaten, unified champion.
Very entertaining to watch.
If you can actually remember what watching a Beterbiev fight is like, as it's been so long that Artur had a fight, some of you may have forgotten.
You don't need to be Bert Sugar to know how this one's gonna end.
I mean, what the hell are we talking about here? I wouldn't even call this a prediction. Short of one of the biggest upsets in recent memory, I've got Artur Beterbiev winning this fight, and winning this fight by way of knockout could end early. Things are running smoothly for what could be the light heavyweight unification match between Artur and Joe Smith Jr., who I think is going to beat Maxim Vlasov. His fight with Maxim has been rescheduled to April 10th. It's set to go down on the undercard of Efe Ajagba versus Brian Howard. One of my favorite up-and-coming heavyweight prospects is set to be making his next ring appearance on that same card, Jared Anderson. Jared Big Baby Anderson, against an opponent that has yet to be announced. I am confident that Joe Smith Jr. is going to make it past Maxim Vlasov, who's a big guy. I mean, he really is. He's big as far as light heavyweights go, but Joe's punching power and his durability and the fact that he's been showing all this improvement as of late, continually winning fights that he's not really favored to win. He wasn't favored to win a later Alvarez, I don't think.
Against him?
I don't think he was favored to beat Jesse Hart either.
He's made a career out of pulling the upset.
I think against Artur Beterbiev, Joe Smith Jr. would once again find himself being the underdog in the match, because Joey's got great punching power, durable guy, great human interest story, but he don't come from the same kind of amateur background that Artur does, and that creates an environment where you got two very big punchers, two very strong guys, but one of them has a more seasoned amateur background than the other. That could make Artur Beterbiev a favorite with the bookies.
But Joe's been in that situation plenty of times.
They're both artillery guys. You gotta understand that. They're both guys that open up and let the fists fly. And every time they open up, that's an opportunity for the man opposite the ring to land something hard. Is it possible that Joe Smith Jr. is just as capable of knocking out Artur as Artur is capable of knocking him out? I think Joe takes a better punch than Artur, but I think Artur delivers a bigger punch than Joe. I don't know, maybe it's just a question of who lands first.
Whoever does wins the fight.